There are lots of specialized debugging windows available in Visual Studio. Let me show you how to see them and add and remove them from the IDE. Before I start, let's talk about the normal layout of our IDE without debugging windows. I'll start by clicking on Window and then choosing Reset Window Layout. This resets Visual Studio back to the defaults. Now I'll open up the C# file and you'll see the standard windows that appear in an edit session. Over on the left side of the screen is the Server Explorer and the Toolbox. On the right side of the screen is the Solution Explorer with several tabs. And at the bottom of this screen is the Properties window. That's what you see when you're editing. What do you see when you debug? You see a different set of windows. Over here on the right side of the screen is this thing called the Diagnostics window. And it's showing a live view of what's happening in my application in my process memory, and it's doing a diagnostics calculation. I don't want to see this for the rest of the demo, so I'll click on this auto hide button. And now it's here in this diagnostic tools section. If I ever need to see it again, I can click here and bring it up. You'll see that there's a docked window over here, live visual tree. This is a window that's helpful when you're working with WPF applications, which I am. And then on the bottom of the screen, you'll see a bunch of tabs. Over here is the Autos window, the Locals window, and the Watch 1 window. And on the right side of the screen is the call stack, the breakpoints, and so on. And here's the breakpoints window. There's nothing here because I don't have any breakpoints in my code. Let's fix that. Now you can see I have one breakpoint in my application. There's also a tab for exception settings, one for the command window, one for the immediate window, and one for the output. As I go through this course, I'll show you what each of these windows do. Once I'm done debugging, of course, I'll stop by clicking on the Stop Debugging button. And you'll see that Visual Studio returns back to the Edit tool windows. Now I'll edit my code for a few minutes, and then when I return back to debugging, you'll see that it opens up my debug windows again. While I'm working in my debug windows, I might decide that I don't like this call stack here. I'd rather have it docked next to my Watch 1 window. So I can pick it up and drag it with my mouse and drop it over here. And here's the nice thing that Visual Studio does for me. It remembers these locations. When I stop debugging and then return later, Visual Studio remembered that I had the call stack window docked over here on the left side of the screen. If you look here, you'll see there's about 10 windows open. These are the standard debug windows. There are more. Let me show you where these windows are. I'll go to the Stop Debugging and then move to the Debug menu and look at this top menu item. This is the Debug Windows section. And you can see over there, there's 5 items: breakpoints, exception settings, output, immediate, and Python. You may not see the Python one. It depends on what you've installed on your computer. If I pick this breakpoints one, remember I'm not debugging at the moment. If I click this breakpoints window, it adds it to my editor windows. So now I can see my breakpoints here. However, it still remembers that I have the breakpoints windows docked in the debugging session. So if I go back and start debugging, this time I'll click on the Start button. You'll see that it remembers that while I'm in debugging mode, it should be docked here on the right side of the screen. Now let me show you something else. I'll go back to the Debug menu and let's reopen this Windows menu. I had 5 items before. Now I've got about 20 items. Some of these items are the standard debug windows, but there's a lot of them that Microsoft figures you don't use on a regular basis. So they're only available when you're debugging. And you can now see these extra windows. For instance, there's one for working with tasks and parallel stacks. There are more than one watch window. So I can add watch 2 or watch 3 to my application. There's items for working with threads and looking at your raw memory on your computer. The one I'll look at is this GPU threads one here. I'll click on this one. And Visual Studio defaults having that one docked up here at the top. I don't like that, so I'll take this window and drag it out and drop it down here next to my call stack. And yes, you've already figured this out. Next time I open a debug session, it's going to remember that I had this GPU threads tab located here, and it'll put it back in that location. That concludes this brief look at the debug windows. As the course unfolds, I'll show you how to utilize these tool windows to help you debug your application.